That's
a little wandery. Hey, welcome everyone to the MMA Vivisection for UFC 210. I'm Zane Simon, joined by Connor Rebish, as always, and we are here to talk about this upcoming fight card in Buffalo, New York.
We're not watching a bunch of awful fights?
No. We actually have a UFC event this week, and most of these fights actually look pretty good.
Oh, so sounds fun.
Yeah, you get actually, we're not here to punish ourselves today.
The flagellation ends for the time being.
That's right. This is the actual church part, the doing good works.
I like that. The vivisection are the good works. The depressed us is the brutal flagellation and self-punishment.
That's right. So we're here to talk about this fight card, which I gotta say, I'm actually gonna end up having to miss this live. And I'm sad about that. I was looking forward to this one. It's the best card of the year so far, I guess, at this point. I mean, 209 was supposed to be that, and did not end up really being that. It ended up being a good event. It shouldn't say that it's not necessarily going to be better than 209, but maybe equal footing with 209.
Is it better than Cub Swanson versus Artem Lobov? That's the real question.
That is the real question. Absolutely.
We do have the next three pay-per-views, however, are pretty lit. Like, this card is pretty solid, especially the main card. 211 is insane, and 212 is looking really good so far as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this and the next 3 months of solid UFC action.
The only thing I don't get is that Calvillo Pearl Gonzalez fight.
Yeah, they've clearly, now that Paige Van Zandt has left Team Alpha Male, at least reportedly, I guess they've worked it out, the UFC brass with Uriah Faber, that Calvillo is going to be the next young female strawweight that they push. So, even though it seems a little early, if we're being honest.
Yeah, Calvillo also she's a great wrestle grappler, but that, much like Paige Van Zandt's style, it's not actually the thing made for great viewing. It's not a style that people aren't going to be watching Cynthia Calvillo fights and being like, "Oh man, did you see that highlight machine that she just, she's turning up?" And she doesn't, she's not a bad looking woman, but she doesn't have the extra appeal that Paige Van Zandt had to
the high school cheerleader vibe that Paige Van Zandt gives out.
Although on the flip side of that, and I don't want to get too far afield into this, but as somebody put it on Twitter, Pearl Gonzalez is kind of a smoke show. So
it's true, a smoke show. You're an old man, Zane. That is something a 60-year-old man would say. That's how a 60-year-old man would describe Janet Lee. She was a smoke show back in the day.
Yeah, whatever. The point being, this Calvillo Gonzalez fight is a very raw fight between two fighters that have a lot to prove, and neither of whom I would target towards superstardom. So it's a weird choice to be centered in the middle of what is otherwise a pretty good pay-per-view.
It should still be a fun fight for us hardcore fans, though. We're going to see a lot of scrambling. We're going to see some fun grappling exchanges.
Sure.
It should be good enough.
We'll get into it as we go. But let's dive into the early part of this card. First and foremost, Jenel versus Magomed Bibulatov.
Well, Magomed Bibulatov has some unsavory connections that he's bringing with him into the UFC. So that's one angle from which we can look at this fight. But his propensity for, wearing a tracksuit and terrifying people that Ramzan Kadyrov does not like aside, he is easily one of the very best flyweight prospects in the world. He's insanely athletic. He is the kind of fighter that I always describe, who throws, more spin kicks and jump knees than jabs, but he gets away with it because even more so than most flyweights, he can maintain a ridiculous pace and do a lot of high energy things without wearing himself out. And of course, on the ground, being a Sambo guy, he's a really aggressive, but very technical grappler. Great transitions. He's very, very good in scrambles. One of those guys who can just create a scramble and almost always end up in the superior position. So he's got that going for him. Jenel Lausa is certainly good enough with his striking to give Bibulatov some problems, but Lausa's, mostly like a boxer, or kind of a boxing-centric Muay Thai stylist, and can't really hang with Bibulatov on the ground. And then on the feet, he reminds me of a flyweight Jimmy Manuwa, like a lot of single high power strikes. He knows how they go together, but rarely throws combinations, rarely works off of a jab. Everything is really kind of surprising you with speed and intelligent targeting. I don't think that's enough to really lock down the movement-heavy style of Bibulatov, and I definitely don't think it's enough to stop Bibulatov getting the takedowns if and when he wants to. So I think you got to go with the Chechen here. I'm taking Bibulatov by decision.
Yeah, I agree, and there's something about the sort of fighters coming from Southeast Asia, and even though I realize he's not from Southeast Asia, he also kind of reminds me a little of Russell Doan, where this really power boxers who can scramble, but the core and they're great athletes, but so many of the other core parts of their game are missing. It's they can hit a few takedowns, they can hit a few submissions, but these are very much, they're built off really shallow MMA training rather than a really comprehensive background in grappling and wrestling, or even in boxing necessarily. And I think Lausa actually has done some boxing and trained as a boxer at some serious boxing gyms in the Philippines. But it does feel very much like he knows how to, he knows how to throw the punches, but he doesn't know how to keep up a busy MMA striking style.
Yeah.
The form is comfortable, but the function is not.
Even in a way, the function is good, right? He's got good timing. He knows how to kind of trick your eyes with distance. Mm-hmm. He landed some really pretty lead rights on Yao Jikui in his debut. But things don't fit together in a cohesive sort of round winning whole necessarily. If he's not landing the bigger shots and getting to spend all that time on his feet, you can definitely see him just dropping rounds through inactivity.
Yeah, and I've seen it in his previous fights too, with guys, his Cristiano Pitpatunge fight back in Pacific Extreme Combat that he won by split decision. He would drop rounds, just not being active enough, letting Pitpatunge dictate the pace and range, and just kind of outwork him. And I definitely think Bibulatov, even standing, can do that, and will be able to out-pressure him in against the fence and down to the ground. And once he does that, he'll really be able to outwork Lausa. Because Lausa's not a bad scrambler, but his takedown defense is not good.
Right.
Odds on that fight, Bibulatov coming in as a large favorite, opening at, well, that's kind of surprising. Must have been an early line, opening at minus 145 and jumped immediately out to minus 250 and now is out to minus 472.
I was like, man, if only he were near minus 100, that would be an easy bet to make.
Yeah, so he opened, somebody didn't know what they were doing when they set his line.
Some bettor lost a lot of money there, or some odds maker lost some money on that early line.
Yeah, and since then, his line has only fallen way out. Lausa opened plus 125 and immediately rocketed up to plus 300 and is now up at plus 362. Yeah, I don't, Bibulatov is a top prospect. Lausa is not. I still think the odds are a little wonky there, but they've gone maybe a little too wide, but not so that I would ever adjust it. Or
we both agree that Bibulatov should be at least a comfortable favorite.
Yeah, he should be a comfortable favorite in this fight. I think now it's getting into the
hype job territory,
gonna blow everyone away thing, where I always want to be cautious about that with guys that are just starting to really face a lot of top competition.
People have been saying for a long time that Bibulatov is the guy to challenge Demetrius Johnson. Temper that and say that he has a good chance of being a guy who could challenge Demetrius Johnson. He's not there yet, so temper that a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Henry Cejudo. Henry Cejudo has run up that division, but he hasn't done it without some trouble. And when he got to Demetrius Johnson, he had nothing.
Look at how insanely good you have to be to even give Demetrius Johnson trouble. Like Timothy Elliott gave Johnson more trouble than he's had in almost any other fight, and he still lost 4 rounds.
Yeah.
So
that brings us to our next bout, a women's bantamweight fight, Katlyn Chookagian versus Irene Aldana. And this is a little bit of a tough one, especially given what we saw from Aldana against Leslie Smith. But I think there's a serious difference here that's going to give Aldana the win in this fight for me. And that's that Chookagian doesn't sit down on nearly enough of anything. Like, she just has a little too much of Holly Holm in her game, where it's a lot of bouncing and a lot of activity and not a lot of power and not a lot of accuracy even. And I think it's going to let Aldana's more technical game shine through, because what really broke her in that Leslie Smith fight was that Smith is willing to sit down in front of Aldana and commit.
Yeah.
She was willing to say, okay, if you want to sit and trade strike for strike with me, I will do that. And I will do it every round. And Aldana did not have the technical depth to deal with the fact that somebody wasn't just going to go away when she landed a few sharp punches.
Yeah, it was also the best performance of Leslie Smith's career by far.
Yeah, that too. Chookagian, I think she seems much more like this is going to be a who lands the better shots in a work rate fight. And I think that Aldana can do that in this. So I'm picking her here.
Yeah, I actually think that who lands the better shot might work for Chookagian here. Who's just cleaner. I think a big thing in this fight is going to be defensive responsibility. And Chookagian, she has had problems with big women who have out-wrestled her. Mm-hmm. That has been the thing that's troubled her. We know that Aldana is not going to try to wrestle her. It would be a shocker if she even went for one takedown. She is a boxer. She throws punches. She likes to come forward, mix things up in the pocket and mid-range. And I think that may actually allow Chookagian's striking game to flourish a little bit. Chookagian is much, much harder to hit, whereas Irene Aldana, even when she fought Faith Van Duyn, was getting tagged with counters. She could not escape the punches of Leslie Smith. It'll look a little different because Chookagian's not going to pressure her the way Smith did and not going to walk her down. But Chookagian is also a better technical striker than Leslie Smith. She shows good straight shots. I also think the variety of her striking is going to help her here. The fact that she's very good at mixing in kicks with her punches. I think she may be able to catch Aldana off guard. I do expect a close, scrappy fight, especially because Aldana is not only more powerful, but throws more volume in most of her fights. But I am expecting Chookagian to nullify her enough to get a decision win.
Oh, yeah. I think I see it more that my reasoning in picking Aldana is that I think that because Chookagian won't be sitting down on enough, it's going to let Aldana feel like she can actually really
that she can just walk through the punches.
Yeah. Really out pressure, but
it's a possibility. I think it'll be a scrap. I mean, I think it'll be a fun fight and back and forth.
Yeah, because both women are pretty tough, and Chookagian, as you say, is much more defensively responsible. So, odds on that fight, Chookagian is actually the favorite. So I'm a little surprised by that. She opened at -210, which surprises me even more and has fallen to minus 156.
It seems a little crazy wide. I mean, there is some logic in that Aldana's not really beaten any really solid fighters, and Chookagian came pretty damn close to beating Liz Carmouche and beat an experienced fighter in Lauren Murphy, but I would think that the odds would be closer because Aldana, again, very powerful, very tough, and even in that Leslie Smith fight, she didn't back down. You know, she didn't lose her discipline. She stayed as sharp as she could and fought back for all 3 rounds, despite being knocked down badly in the first. So, yeah, Aldana's a gamer.
Yeah, Aldana opening at plus 160, now at plus 131. So those odds have been falling closer and closer, which I think they should. And I honestly, I feel like they should be close to even. And they are. I mean, they're relatively close to even. I just think this is a fight that feels like a coin flip to me.
Once again, somebody lost some money on those early lines because somebody got a really good deal on Irene Aldana, and she does have a really good chance of winning.
Yeah. That brings us to a lightweight bout, Josh Emmett versus Des Green.
Looking forward to this one, man. Des Green has had a long road getting into the UFC, although he's not actually been fighting that long. He's just he has just fought a lot. He's been a very active fighter, been all over the place, Bellator, Titan. And, it's good to see him in the UFC, especially because this is hometown, Buffalo, New York. So he's going to make his debut on a nice stage in front of a supportive crowd. I do think that Josh Emmett's going to be able to beat him, although I think it'll be close. Des Green has a few problems. He's tends to spend a lot of time in fights not really doing much. That was a problem for him in Bellator, and in some of his more recent fights as well, where he just kind of gets outworked because he spends time like trying to give the guy other looks and just watching him. And maybe it's something with stamina. I don't know. Although Des Green does seem to have really good conditioning. So I think maybe it's just a problem of focus, a fight IQ problem, if you will. And the other thing is that he does tend to get a little wild sometimes when he's attacking. He kind of lunges in with these weird loopy shots. I think that Josh Emmett has really proven himself to be a pretty capable counterpuncher. You allow him to get into the pocket and he is going to stay low, move his head, and throw short shots that carry a good amount of power. He may not have a lot of knockouts, but he has been stinging people in all of his UFC fights and was stinging people before that. So Des Green may make things interesting by using his wrestling. He is a very capable wrestler, but Emmett, being a Team Alpha Male guy, solid takedown defense and very good scrambling, also a good wrestler in his own right. You give him an opportunity to get into the clinch. More often than not, it ends up that he finds himself on top. So I think, once again, it'll be a scrappy back and forth fight. I don't think Des Green is out of the picture at all, but I think that Emmett will do enough to outwork him and land the better shots.
Yeah, that's a lot of my feeling in this too. Emmett, he has a big thing, which is that he's got a lot of hand speed.
Mm-hmm.
Just a lot of really surprising quick burst speed on his strikes that catches people way off guard. And he's got a pretty good variety too in how what he chooses to throw. He throws to the body, he throws to the head, he works a lot of angles. He's very good at hopping in and out of range to land shots. I mean, that's the thing that carried him through that fight. Who did he fight last?
Scott Holtzman. The
Scott Holtzman fight was really that he would pick the better strikes. He had more variety to offer.
Yep.
And Green, even like I was just watching his fight with Martin Brown, and it's like most of how he won that fight was his ability to get and keep dominant positions. And even that was really tough for him.
Yeah.
And Holtzman's, he's just a tiny ball of muscle. He's going to be hard to hold down, hard to dominate in that way. And almost all Team Alpha Male guys are nearly impossible to hold down in that way.
Yeah, and the other thing that I don't think Team Alpha Male gets enough credit for is the stamina of their fighters. Like pretty much everyone at Team Alpha Male is extremely well conditioned. And Emmett was definitely tired in the fight with Scott Holtzman, but it doesn't really bother me when I see someone get tired, especially when the pace is as insane as it was in that fight, because that was a crazy fast-paced fight. The fact was that he got tired but maintained his composure and still fought well, and that's a sign of not only good physical but good mental conditioning.
And Des Green in that last Martin Brown fight, he needed an oxygen mask after that fight. You know, he was in the cage, up against the cage with an oxygen mask on.
Yeah. So if it comes to pushing the pace, you have a feeling that Josh Emmett can probably do it a little better.
Yeah, I just think that Green, he, really a lot of the story of his success in MMA has been his ability to be a physically dominant force.
Yeah.
And he's not an overwhelming physical fighter.
Yeah, and maybe it is a stamina issue that makes him so inactive for periods of the fight. I mean, I didn't recall that, but if he needed an oxygen mask after a fight that I don't recall being really insanely fast paced, maybe that's the reason that he tends to take time off. And Emmett, we've seen when he gets tired, he doesn't take time off. He still fights.
It could be that, and it just I don't know. Maybe his training as well. Although he comes up from TriStar, so it's not. He's in TriStar now apparently. So I don't know. It just he doesn't seem to have the. I have a very high distrust of fighters who are physically dominant fighters on the regionals, unless I'm seeing an insane athleticism. This this Yoel Romero type dynamicism where I'm just like, oh my god, I don't even, this guy could do this to anyone in the world, and I have no doubt about it. If I don't see that, it's hard to trust somebody who's just really bullying people regionally without hurting them a lot, because that when you get to the UFC, it's really hard to bully people that way.
Yeah.
Odds on that fight, Emmett is the favorite, opening at -155, but dropping really quickly to -211 and moving out now to -225. Green opening at +115 and going up quickly to +169 and eventually evening out at about 180. So
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, those feel like reasonably right odds for me, given Emmett's power and speed and higher work rate, but Green's high control style and ability to do his own thing. So there's always a chance that if Green can assert himself physically over Emmett, who's a pretty small, I mean, he's kind of built like a fire hydrant, but he's not a big lightweight, then I don't have a huge problem with that. That brings us to another lightweight bout, Gregor Gillespie versus Andrew Holbrook. And this is a continued test to me of Gregor Gillespie's ability to be a real lightweight. That's the big thing that I think almost any fight like this that Gillespie's going to have in the UFC is going to test that. Is Gregor Gillespie actually a lightweight? Because he is what? He's
5'9".
He's 5'9", and he's not a big 5'9". Like it's not like he's underwhelmingly muscled or unathletic or anything. He's an amazing athlete. But he's not. You don't see him at 5'9" in a fight. It's not like Davi Ramos fighting at 170, where it was like, okay, I understand you're a lightweight, but you're also a half mile wide. He looks like a featherweight.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's his insane wrestling ability and insane cardio and drive and ability to just chain wrestle through anything that keeps him alive in these fights. And he's even had fights against guys who are, not anywhere near the top of the world. His fight with Sydney Outlaw in in Ring of Combat was a really, really hard fight for Gillespie, mostly because of how big Outlaw was, and that
That's a good name, goddammit.
It is a good name.
That is like a 1920s boxer's name.
I'm picking Gillespie because his cardio is better, because he has kept himself from getting submitted so far, and because Holbrook gives up so many opportunities in scramble. Like, Holbrook is a good grappler and really not a lot else. Like, he's a good scrambling grappler, and the rest of his game is not dominating in any way, shape, or form. And I think that Gillespie can outwork a good scrambling grappler, but all these fights are going to be tests for him, because if he can't, the moment he can't outwork someone and can't make that technical advantage work because of physicality, he's just gonna get punished hard for it. His striking it's functional, but he kind of reminds me of Kamaru Usman, but a couple steps behind in, like, you see him do decent striking things, but he also gets hit really hard sometimes and has this kind of woodenness to it that you're like, oh, that really has to get worked out. And if it doesn't, it's not going to be an elite striking game. And it's not something he can rely on. Holbrook throws a lot of power standing, but he's also not any kind of technical striker. He's just kind of a wild throw bombs at somebody, try to get them off balance, and then rush in and pull guard or shoot or whatever it needs to get the fight into a scramble. So I'm picking Gillespie to gut through early trouble and win, but it's going to, for a guy that I think could contend for the featherweight title, I don't like every lightweight fight is going to be is he going to stay in the UFC the way he fighting at lightweight? I don't even know. So it's kind of a weird dichotomy.
Yeah. Before I give you my pick and analysis, I have an important update from a viewer of the show, Knockout Ned on Twitter, who says that I'll have you know that referring to hot women as smoke shows is extremely common here in New England. Though Zane Simon may still be a 70-year-old man, it is possible. But picture a grizzled Pats fan from Swampscott with a Brady jersey. That's how they talk. So you would fit right in on the other coast, Zane.
Oh, man. I don't know what that says about me, but it's not good.
It means buy a Brady jersey, buddy. You got a new group of friends. Yeah, it's Gregor Gillespie. Everything you said about his size is great. I kind of hate having to say stuff like that, because I don't want, like, Gregor Gillespie should be the size you should be to be a lightweight, right? Mm-hmm. It should be reasonable that he's a lightweight. Guys cut so much weight these days, but it's true. He's going to be outsized by a lot of his opponents, and he always has been, and that has been a problem for him. I think it could be a problem here with Holbrook. Holbrook is very scrappy. You know, he's tough. He's not a pretty striker, but he puts on pressure when he needs to, and that did give Gillespie some trouble with Glyco Franca. And then, unlike Franca, Holbrook can really handle himself on the ground. Franca was basically, if he was taken down with 3 minutes left to go, that was the rest of the round. He was going to spend 3 minutes either stuck in a takedown attempt or on his back. He could not get Gillespie off of him, whereas Holbrook, we know he has a really solid submission game, especially from the front headlock, which is always scary for wrestlers. He's got several wins by guillotine and anaconda. He's also very heavy on the ground with a nice back take game. He's a solid scrambler and a potent submission grappler. So that could be a problem for Gillespie, especially with the size disadvantage against Holbrook. But I also think that Gillespie is probably a good enough striker to nail Holbrook on the feet a few times. He's not very good defensively. I don't really think I've ever seen somebody from Belmore Kickboxing Academy who has great defense, but he's got really good offensive boxing. He's got a nice, clean jab. When he got his striking going against Glyco Franca, when he did some really nice basic stuff, but he did it very well, landing the jab, feinting it low, and then coming back up high, throwing it to the body, feinting it low, and coming back with the right hand over the top. A lot of nice little combinations and setups that looked really good. And then, of course, you have the wrestling. He hasn't been caught in any submissions before. You know, nobody's really threatened him on the ground. Holbrook may be the best submission grappler he's faced, but I do have faith that Gillespie can protect his neck well enough to grind out a decision here.
I also don't have a lot of faith in Holbrook's gas tank and the way he fights.
Yeah, whereas Gillespie's conditioning has not really ever looked bad.
No, I mean Gillespie, he strikes me as the kind of like near championship level wrestler. Like he won a national title, didn't he? Or did he just?
I don't know. Actually, it's not on his Wikipedia page. I had trouble finding out what his wrestling background actually was.
It's a pretty good one. Like
is he one of the Hofstra guys?
Yeah, he was former NCAA Division I national champion, Gregor Gillespie.
There you go.
So, this is not like I can't believe that's not on his Wikipedia page.
Right. Somebody was very lazy putting that Wikipedia page together.
Like the dude is a legit national champion level wrestler.
They got to Sydney Outlaw and they were done. Like that's all we need. That's all you need to know is that Gregor Gillespie has beaten a man with the name of a 20s boxer.
Yeah. So Gillespie, like he's the kind of dude that I feel like can just wrestle and grapple all day if need be. Holbrook seems more like Holbrook seems like a very good, he's got that jiu-jitsu grappling, which is like really good and crafty and powerful, but also like the jiu-jitsu cardio that goes with it, where it's like, oh, I didn't submit this guy in a really hard scramble in the first 5 minutes, and now I am totally drained.
Mm-hmm.
The sort of Tim Kennedy versus Hodger Gracie matchup.
Yeah.
Where even though Hodger Gracie is one of the world's best grapplers, was just totally gassed out against Tim Kennedy.
And if Gillespie gets his strikes going, it could actually look like King Mo versus Hodger Gracie.
Yeah. So I am leaning Gillespie, but I will not be at all surprised if he gets caught in a choke early and submitted in a scramble. Just because he can't outmuscle, just because he can't control Holbrook on the ground.
Yeah.
Gillespie opened at minus 170, is now at minus 234, and Holbrook at plus 130, now up to plus 191. Holbrook inside the distance is plus 295.
What's Holbrook by submission? Do they have that?
They don't have that.
Yeah, maybe.
Actually, Holbrook inside the distance, yeah, plus 295. Like, I'm not saying
that might be worth $1.
It's just Holbrook has a submission chance. Like he has a serious,
better than most. He's very, very good on the ground. He's a very thoughtful and creative grappler. He could. Yeah, and the thing with Gillespie's size, did it say when you looked up his wrestling record what weight he wrestled at?
No, I didn't. Let's see. I didn't look that carefully.
I mean, a lot of wrestlers managed to cut a lot more weight when they were wrestlers than in MMA. Like I think Chad Mendez wrestled at like 135 or 133, maybe the weight.
Yeah.
And like Anthony Johnson wrestled at 174. Like a lot of guys, they make crazy weights when they're wrestlers. But I wouldn't be surprised if Gillespie was down in like the 130, the 133 range as a wrestler. And even with Glyco França, who does not have great takedown defense, Gillespie ended up spending a lot of time just sort of pinning França to the fence, working hard to get the takedowns. And that wouldn't happen if his opponents weren't so much bigger. And Holbrook's a good sized lightweight. So
yeah,
that could give him enough time to find those submissions. I don't think that's an unlikely possibility.
No. Just worth throwing out there. I'm not telling you to bet on anything. I don't bet on anything. I'm just seeing the odds, and I'm like, maybe Holbrook has a shot to win by submission in this.
If he wins, that's how he's going to do it.
Exactly. And that brings us to a light heavyweight bout. Patrick Cummins versus Jan Blachowicz.
This is me, right?
Yeah, this is you.
Well, this is obviously the main event of the prelims. Two guys who are just stuck in the mud in like the 10 to 15 range at light heavyweight, and really only because there is no one at light heavyweight are they even still in the top 15. It's not like either guy has no capabilities, but both guys have. These are two fighters that really seem to be defined by their holes, by the flaws in their MMA games. Patrick Cummins has struggled to improve as a striker. I think he has made strides. I wouldn't be surprised if he continues to make strides. He's working with Rafael Cordero, so if you want to find somebody who turns wrestlers and grapplers into capable strikers, that's your guy. So I'll have my eye on him for that. But he also does not have a great chin. And he has also, I think, maybe because he knows he can be knocked out, struggled to integrate his new striking skills into his wrestling. He's kind of two different fighters at any given moment.
Also, nobody gets hit harder than Patrick Cummins gets hit. I don't know if it's a footwork thing or a body posture thing or just karma. Nobody gets hit harder.
He takes some hellacious shots. I mean, to be fair, he does get stopped by good, fairly powerful strikers. Like the least powerful guy was Little Nog. Even Little Nog can throw a thunderbolt of a left hand when he needs to.
Yeah.
So, there's something to be said there. The point of that is that Blachowicz is probably not powerful enough to knock Cummins' block off the way other guys have. He's certainly powerful enough to catch him and hurt him. But the real problem for Blachowicz is that he's not in really good shape for a fighter. He doesn't seem to be able to push any kind of pace and never has been, which is the reason that he went like 5 hard rounds with Chookagian in like 2013. He's incapable of putting out enough volume to really take over a round against the best fighters in the world, and kind of holds himself back and sticks to this sort of pot shotting and counter punching game, but just doesn't put enough stuff together to steal the fight. And I think that'll be a problem for him here. And then of course, Blachowicz, he's faced good wrestlers in the UFC, but his takedown defense has been pretty bad. And Patrick Cummins cannot match guys like Alexander Gustafsson and Corey Anderson for like the completeness of their games. But as far as wrestling goes, he's up there with some of the best in the division. He's a very good takedown artist, really nice top control. I think he can get Blachowicz down, and when he does, I expect him to seal rounds and possibly even do some serious damage from top position. So I take Patrick Cummins by decision. Sorry, Durkin by decision.
Oh God, that nickname. I don't even know what the origin of it is, but it never fails to make me. It never fails to make me not understand how that isn't everybody's choice for worst nickname in MMA.
It sounds like Gherkin and Merkin, two things that I have no use for and do not like. So
yeah,
it's not. It doesn't recall.
You don't wear a Merkin?
Well, I can't afford a really good one just yet. But when I can get to that silver squirrel fur Merkin level of wealth, I will definitely be wearing one on a daily basis.
Oh Lord!
Patrick Cummins should market Merkins, by the way. Durkin's Merkins would be an amazing brand.
Durkin's Merkins, yes. All right. There are two things that play for me in this fight that make it really tough for me to pick. One is Blachowicz. I believe he's changed his training up recently. Like he got into some actual biometric stuff to actually measure his blood oxygen level and stuff like that. And he was completely to his credit, an entirely better, the best fighter he's ever been against Alexander Gustafsson.
Yeah, that's true. He looked really good.
He threw volume. He threw power. He stepped in. He was the guy that people have been wanting him to be and expected him to be when he came to the UFC. He
made it at least so that it was not the big triumphant comeback that Gustafsson was hoping for, which is
bad in that fight. Gustafsson had to just take him down and lay on him because he was getting outstruck.
True. He had to wrestle him.
Now to that same effect, he's always, because in this classic, very European, early, mid 2000s kind of game that he has, his wrestling game has always, his takedown game has always been bad because it was always sort of assumed if I get taken down, I can just hit a submission off my back. He was always, let yourself get taken down and immediately look for the arm bar. And it's left him with really bad takedown defense in the UFC, really functionless takedown defense. On the flip side of that as well, though, as bad as his takedown defense is, and as much as he's had problems with cardio and with throwing any kind of volume at all, I don't trust anything about the way that that Patrick Cummins is fighting right now. I don't trust the way Patrick Cummins fights, and if I don't trust the way Patrick Cummins fights, I don't know that I can pick him to beat Blachowicz. I feel like if Blachowicz comes out throwing volume, fighting the way he did against Alexander Gustafsson, he can hit Patrick Cummins enough to hurt him and to potentially knock him out, to force Cummins at the very least, into the kind of bad fight that Cummins can lose. Because Cummins also, like, he has power. He's been working on his boxing. He can be a smothering top player when he wants. But his control on top is never great. He almost always ends up letting somebody up if they're willing to work hard to get up. And he never finishes anyone early. Like, he's not the kind of brutal top player because he doesn't have great control on top. Even when he can land, even though he has good ground and pound and can land hard shots, he rarely can push the kind of dominant wrestling game that just breaks people.
That's true. I think when I said good top control, I was really remembering his fight with Feijão. But
even Feijão got up a lot in that fight.
That's true.
I think that Blachowicz, if he comes out and fights like he did against Alexander Gustafsson, he can knock Cummins out. So I'm picking Blachowicz here.
You made a good case.
I don't trust the way Cummins is fighting lately. Especially like that Little Nog fight where he's like, I'm going to come out and test my boxing. You're like, really? This fight? Yeah. The dude you can absolutely take down and just out wrestle?
He did get stuffed on the first takedown he went for, though.
I know he did.
Maybe that hurt his confidence or something. But yeah, he may be in a more fragile place than Blachowicz, who you're right, he does seem to be making genuine strides to improve himself.
Yeah, well, I don't trust.
Cummins is at a good camp, a good coach, so both guys are working for it. But maybe Blachowicz has shown the better signs recently.
Yeah, I don't trust anything Cummins is doing. Honestly, yeah. I just don't.
That's fair.
Cummins opened at -115, has gone up to -1. Went up all the way to +104. Is at -106 right now, and Blachowicz opened at -125, is now up at -116. Recently, just was even at pretty much, and then has jumped up to -116. So the odds are running pretty much dead even right now, which
feels fine for two guys who are like 1-3 in their last 4.
Yeah, and Cummins, who has a very fragile chin, and Blachowicz, who has very fragile wrestling.
Yeah, both guys with holes that the other can easily exploit. It should actually be a weirdly interesting fight, but it could also be an extremely ugly fight.
Oh, I think it'll be fun no matter what.
Yeah.
But that brings us to a featherweight bout, Charles Rosa versus Shane Burgos. And man, I'm looking forward to this fight.
Yeah, absolutely. Charles Rosa is this you?
This is me.
Sorry, please go. Please go. Sorry. I was excited. I jumped right in.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to this fight a lot. Charles Rosa has been around the UFC a bit. He's a fun athlete with a weird game.
Yeah.
And he's exactly the right kind of next fight for Shane Burgos, I think. Because Rosa is both he's a high output. He's like Yair Rodriguez without the absurd athleticism and without the wrestling.
On the round table, Jordan Breed called him a wonky Aljamain Sterling. Yeah. Which kind of works.
It's like Aljamain Sterling without a wrestling game. Because Rosa's a very willing grappler. Yeah. And a decent submission artist, a good scrambler, but he will never be the dude that gets somebody down or goes for the takedown.
You do feel, however, watching Rosa, that if he could just get some serious wrestling training and just improve his double leg by like 25%, he could be a much more consistent fighter.
Yeah. Burgos for me is a fighter that, like, my only real concern for Burgos has been that he had like he's had spinal issues when he was a kid, or when he was a teenager,
Yeah.
and had to have back surgery. And it's just sort of like, how long does his back hold up? Because otherwise, I really love most of Shane Burgos' game. His biggest problem is that he doesn't pull the trigger enough, but he makes up for that by having absurd power and a ton of accuracy. So I love the way his striking flows into his grappling game. He's not an easy person to just out wrestle or to out, he's just a really good, solid, athletic, fun fighter. And he should be able to beat Charles Rosa, who's striking, his reliance on a kicking game, like, because it is that sort of Aljamain Sterling thing, like, it's so fun to see, but functionless, where it's like you throw all these kicks, so few of which land, and they just make you tired. And that all seems just ripe for countering from Burgos. Like, it's going to offer so much for Burgos to catch and counter, especially because Rosa's boxing is not a real threat behind it.
Yeah.
So I think this is going to be it's a good fight for Burgos, and it should give him a chance to, it's a small step up, but a chance to shine against a really good stylistic matchup for him.
Yeah, Rosa, there's something to be said too for the fact that Rosa, I know that for a while, like when John Jones was knocking down Vitor Belfort with sidekicks, you're like, oh, the sidekick's the new thing in MMA. There's something to be said for the utter defensive appearance that position gives you. You know, like standing side on, just kind of sticking up your leg. You look like your distance can be collapsed. Like, you look inviting for somebody who wants to press forward and nail you when you try to throw a kick. And that has given Rosa problems. He's struggled to keep people at range. The sidekicks aren't quite powerful enough. And he's really got to kind of scramble out of the way when people press in after he throws one, because he's basically left with his back facing his opponent. And so it puts him in these uncomfortable positions that a puncher like Burgos can probably capitalize on. Then again, Burgos may give away a few minutes per round because of the distance, because he's not super active and he mostly likes to throw short punches. And so he is going to have to catch a kick and then step in and let his hands go. And it may take him a while to get used to that. There were some nice signs in his last fight against Thiago Trator, who, by the way, looked really good.
Yeah, I'm sad that they cut Trator after that fight, because it was the best fight of Trator's career.
Trator showed up, man. He was there. He was throwing down. He was throwing good combinations. Gave Burgos a really good, tough fight. And that actually prompted Burgos to get a little more aggressive, to step in more, to throw more combinations. He looked a little less like a pure counterpuncher and more like another Tiger Schulman fighter in Jimmy Rivera. Pressuring, still countering, but keeping the pressure on while he did it. So, the thing with Charles Rosa, though, is like Burgos is a guy who he's got this swagger to him. Maybe it's a little unearned. For example, he does a lot of, like, before Conor McGregor developed his excellent head movement, he used to do this thing where he would like hang his chin out there, and then like he would be surprised when somebody took a swing at it, because he didn't have a prepared defense. And Burgos is kind of like that. He's not an amazing defensive fighter, but he's got the swagger of somebody who is impossible to hit. So that will probably get him into trouble at some point. Rosa is probably not the guy to do it. And the thing with Rosa is that, like I was saying, Burgos is a guy whose confidence alone can carry him through a fight, can allow him to look dominant, even when he's not necessarily dominating. Whereas Charles Rosa is kind of inconsistent when it comes to dominating fights. This is a guy who can lose a close split decision to Yair Rodriguez, but who can also almost lose to Sean Soriano, who was winless, I think, in the UFC. And Soriano may have beaten Rosa if he didn't get caught in a submission late in the third round. A very close, very tough fight. So it's just kind of hard to trust Rosa, even though he has a lot of good skills and he's definitely tough and he's definitely game it's just kind of hard to trust him to take over a fight against someone who's just very confident in their direction in a fight. Burgos is going to have a sense of purpose that I think Charles Rosa often lacks. So I like Shane Burgos by decision.
Yeah, that's my feeling as well. And I just think that Burgos, I like too much of how all the pieces of his game fit together to, for somebody who like Rosa, whose game really does not fit together well at all, for me to pick Rosa to beat him off of catching him out with a spin kick or something like that.
Or a submission that may not even arise because he's probably not going to get Burgos down.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said for the confidence, maybe you could say even arrogance of Burgos' fighting style that is in some ways unearned. But on the other side of that coin, he's not worried at all at any point in a fight. When Torre was getting in on takedowns, I remember how Burgos, he got caught in a waist cinch, and he just sat against the cage, didn't even use his arms, just conserved his energy. He was super calm and composed, and that kind of stuff does go a long way.
Yeah. So I'm picking Burgos too. I think it's the smart pick here. He opened at -165 and has fallen out to -225. And Rosa opened at +125 and is now up at +184. I think that's right. Those lines should be going apart like that. Rosa has not shown himself to be a great finisher in the UFC at this level. And when he does finish, it's by submissions, and it's usually with people who want to scramble with him and want to get on the ground with him. And that just doesn't seem like it's something that Burgos is going to fall into. So that brings us to a welterweight bout. Kamaru Usman versus Sean Strickland.
Why is this not the featured prelim?
I don't know.
Why is Myles Jury versus Mike De La Torre the fight maybe because it's more likely to be a banger with guys who are willing to throw punches, but I mean,
Myles Jury is not known for his bang ability.
He used to be. Maybe he'll bring it back. I'm hoping he does. He used to be more of a finisher.
He's been a finisher, but even when he's a finisher, he's not like he was a really good, surprisingly good top control guy. And then as he became a better striker, it was a very flash and footwork and, out-slick you kind of striking.
As Dallas Winston used to say, he was a sniper.
Yeah.
He's
never been.
But if we're talking about guys who have serious divisional potential, solid prospects, Kamaru Usman and Sean Strickland are the ones to watch on this preliminary card. Everybody who ever looks at my Twitter feed knows that I'm a huge fan of Sean Strickland. I probably talk about him a lot. I find him to be fascinating, even if I don't think he's got an easy path to victory in this fight. He has a lot of things that I like. He's got the sort of composure of a veteran, despite being a really young fighter. I always talk about how he has fantastic eyes, and I'm not just talking about how handsome he is. I mean, he's very aware, right? He doesn't necessarily have textbook defensive skills, but it's really hard to catch Sean Strickland clean because he's super aware of what's going on in the pocket. It's something that comes with experience, it's difficult to surprise Sean Strickland with anything. He's very good defensively. He's got a really nice sense of distance and rhythm that he works off of beautifully with a really nice stinging jab. And I think he's got a lot more power than most realize in his right hand as well. He can really crack. And that could be a problem for Usman, who's been a little chinny in the past, and who, if he can't get his wrestling game working, if he can't collapse that distance, doesn't really look like an amazing striker just yet. He's got the mechanics of somebody who's been trained well, which is not surprising because he's been working with Henry Hooft for quite a while now. But he needs the takedowns working before he can feel confident in letting his hands and kicks go, because I think they have to be integrated into his wrestling to work. And so the thing with Usman is that he really is a phenomenally dominant wrestler. He's an insanely good athlete. He's extremely strong. He explodes really quickly. but he does not falter when he's locked up in a position. He's reminds me of a guy like Mirsad Bektic, where he will get you against the fence. He'll lace up a leg, make you carry his weight, stick you in an uncomfortable position where you're straining just to keep from being totally collapsed. And all the while he is pounding you with short punches and elbows. Just a really tiresome's not the word, but a fighter who makes you weary. Like fighting Kamaru Usman is not easy. And Sean Strickland, very well conditioned. I've never seen him look tired. Underrated defensive wrestler, pretty good scrambler. But if he gets locked up against the fence, I don't really see him easily escaping. So we have kind of a two true outcome fight here where Usman can probably steal more time with his method. That's more likely than it is that Strickland lands the perfect shot and knocks Usman out. And I think he would at least have to land a really good perfect shot in 2 rounds to win a decision, or he'd have to stop Usman to beat him. So I think Strickland's a good test for Usman. I think, and it could even be an opportunity for Strickland to really break through and establish himself as a potential contender in this division. But Usman seems to have the drive and the focus. He's determined to win rounds, whereas Strickland is always kind of coasting through fights. Not that I think he's like Sean Strickland would probably beat everyone if he had 10 rounds. You know what I mean? He's that kind of fighter. He's so difficult to get to and so difficult to hurt and so difficult to wear out and so adept at finding little openings and just sort of figuring out his opponents. But much like a guy we're going to talk about on the main card, Will Brooks, it can be tough to figure guys out when you only have 15 minutes and when the other guy knows exactly what he wants to do to take rounds from you right now. So I'm taking Kamaru Usman by decision.
Yeah, this fight gives me pause because obviously I've been a big fan of Usman's since before he got to the UFC, and I've followed his career since, you know, all the way up. But Strickland presents a much tougher test than probably anybody that Usman has faced, even though I really think highly of Warley Alves and Leon Edwards. And a part of that is that Strickland is huge for a welterweight. At, you know, even 6'1", I realize isn't the tallest in the world, but he's a 6'1" and as broad as Strickland is. Like, he's a big dude. He is probably the biggest welterweight that Usman will have faced. In fact, I'm sure he is. Warley Alves is 5'11", and Leon Edwards is 6 foot, but really beanpole-y. And it means that, and Yakovlev is 6'3", but completely just a string bean. So it makes me feel like there's a little bit of me is wondering if Strickland can be as hard to take down as he can be. Will this be a point that really tests Usman's ability to press a power wrestling game?
Yeah. And a big part of that might be Strickland just maintaining distance, not giving Usman the range to set up those takedowns.
But but even if Usman can get in, like if he just can't get those takedowns working, and if it's just a fence battle, like Usman might win that still, but it means that Strickland gets a lot of chances to work, very likely like a lot of chances to work at range behind a jab.
Yeah.
The big problem I have on Strickland's side is that, you know, you say that he's a sneakily powerful puncher. I don't think even he understands that, though. He is woefully unwilling to commit to throwing power.
He's like a boxer, you know, he's like a slick boxer in an MMA ring, and it's hard to make that style work without some adjustments. He is one of the premier examples of the young veteran category who he's been fighting like big, strong, grown men since he was a teenager and has learned to survive, but not necessarily learned how to dominate, even though it looks a lot of times like he could.
Yeah. And it, you know, he doesn't land with power very often. And that could be really good for Kamaru Usman because that jab could cause him a lot of problems. Just because Usman is still, Usman's a fighter. I found he gets better as the fight goes on, including his striking part of that, maybe his wrestling working. I think a lot of it too is.
I think it's his fights often remind me of Wilson Hayes versus Yuta Sasaki. Because Sasaki's striking was really surprisingly effective, but once Hayes got the wrestling going and scored a few takedowns, he started to outstrike Sasaki as well as out wrestling him. That's how Usman is, I think.
Yeah, I think it's partially that, and I think it's also every fight he needs a little comfort and a little time to get used to the idea that he's not going to get knocked out.
Yeah, sure.
And so it's like once he starts to feel that, once he feels like he has the physicality to compete, and he's not, he can take a few shots and he's not going to get KO'd, then he starts to step in with a lot of confidence. And when he does that, the fact that he's super powerful really comes through, and he just catches people with these shots that, suddenly the fact that he's not, even though he's not swinging these like huge wide clubbing shots, his short punches have a lot of power on them, and it's the confidence to step in with them. So I worry that he may not get that comfort in this fight, and that Strickland can just kind of keep him in this awkward range game and pick at him. But I'm going to pick Usman mostly because I'm a big fan, and I believe that, it's the time for his wrestling to really show up. Like, this is the time where his wrestling game really has to mean something more than it did against Yakovlev, who he could have beaten anyway. And more than it did against Edwards, who's a very good fighter. Like, this is a fight where he really has to impress his technical advantages.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to the fight with Edwards in a way.
Yeah. It's similar, except that Edwards commits to a lot more power and has a lot more one-punch potential to knock somebody out, but also has a lot more trouble competing with fighters physically at times. Edwards can be sort of, if you can bully Edwards, you can shut down some of his game. But I'm going to lean Usman, but I'm really not comfortable about this. And I can easily see Strickland upsetting him, in much like Strickland upset Tom Breeze, where you could argue that Breeze won that fight, but Strickland really shut down his game and made it an ugly points battle that could go either way.
Yeah, Kamaru Usman is used to dominating people. And who dominates Sean Strickland?
Yeah.
Nobody dominates him. It's always a close, difficult fight. He's just very precise and thoughtful and well-rounded. So it's difficult to take it away from him that easily.
Well, and, the one guy that beat him, Santiago Ponzinibbio, did it by just really exposing the fact that Strickland doesn't have a power striking game behind his jab.
Yeah, like, and even then, it was still a fairly close fight. Like, Strickland fought his way back into it. It's just difficult. The defensive awareness and everything, it makes it's hard to beat Strickland, but it can also be hard for Strickland to beat other people. But I think that'll make for a very interesting fight.
So Usman is coming in as a big favorite, starting at -215, jumping out to -330, and leveling off there. Strickland, the underdog, opening at +165, jumping up to +255 and leveling out there. I mean, for a fight that feels like it could easily be a coin toss to me, those odds seem really wide.
Yeah, if you were to bet on Usman, you'd probably take Usman by decision. Strickland's very tough, very hard to finish. You might consider putting a small bet on Sean Strickland. It is a close fight, but it is tough for me against somebody who's so focused as Usman to really expect Strickland to win. So I feel like I should never tell anyone to bet on anything, so I'm not going to. But I don't know why Strickland is that big an underdog, frankly, because I like Usman a lot. I'm a big fan, but his wins over or over Warley Alves, over Leon Edwards, those are fights that
they got easier for him as they went on, and he was able to impose his physical game, but they did not start out all that even. And especially in Alves' case, like Alves is a fighter that we know is made to just kind of break down as the fight goes on if he can't get his way.
And Strickland's kind of the opposite.
Yeah.
Like he tends to grow and get stronger as the fight goes on. So
yeah, so this feels like a very tough fight to me, where I don't necessarily, Usman has to show more technical dominance in getting takedowns and asserting his striking game than I think he ever has before, because he's not going to have the same kind of physical advantage. Like Yakovlev is a very good wrestler and hand-to-hand boxer, kind of combative fighter, very technically well-rounded, but does not have the physicality to compete at welterweight. And I don't think you can draw all that much off Usman being incredibly physically dominant in that fight for this.
That's why it's the highlight of the undercard, right?
Yep.
It's this fascinating matchup.
It may be a completely boring fight, too.
Could be, but I think it'll still be interesting for people who are invested in these two fighters.
Sure. You know? All right, that brings us to Myles Jury versus Mike De La Torre. I have to pick Jury here. I don't think this is a particularly hard choice, other than the fact that Jury has, obviously the losses to Donald Cerrone and Charles Oliveira were both kind of majorly exposing losses for Jury, mostly showing that in his very well-rounded, put together style, he can be completely beat by fighters who possess a much better singular skill than him. But that's not Mike De La Torre. Mike De La Torre is also sort of a generic, decent at everything, not great at anything fighter.
He's and probably the harder hitter, but that's about it.
Probably the harder hitter, but his brawling is very willing and ugly.
Yeah.
And it's bound to give, I think it's really set up to give Jury just the kind of striking performance he would want. Somebody who's going to go in swinging both arms wild with his chin hanging out there. And I mean, like, Godofredo Pepe lit Mike De La Torre up. Lit him up. And this is Godofredo Pepe. So I feel like Jury is prepared for that. So I'm picking Jury probably by TKO, maybe even submission, but I'm saying TKO round 2, maybe round 1.
Yeah, there's a lot I like about Mike De La Torre, and you know that, but I generally like him as an underdog. I think of him as an underdog all the time. A guy who can surprise his opponents by being powerful, by being, if not super durable, at least super willing to take a shot if he needs to. But he does.
He's a much better wrestler and scrambler than people expect. That's the thing that really catches people off guard.
His defensive wrestling is really solid, but Jury is a really good wrestler. And if he does press it, the thing you can do with Mike De La Torre is nullify him with wrestling. He's probably not going to get taken down easily, and he'll pop right back up if he does. But it also means he's not swinging leather. He's being controlled. And for this fight, it's probably all about Jury controlling while Mike De La Torre kind of loses control. Little too willing to brawl, as you said. Not even a lot too willing to brawl, to just go wild and trade punches with his opponents. And, he could catch Jury out in an exchange if Jury, after, leaving Alliance and then leaving Power MMA, is now, I think, maybe trying to get a little more aggressive. I think he was a little more aggressive in his earlier fights and was kind of tempered by his time at Alliance, as many other fighters have been. If he does come in and try to scrap with De La Torre a bit, he could find himself in trouble, but chances are, just being a better technical striker and being the more disciplined fighter, I think, is enough to get him a win here. So yeah, I take De La Torre, I take I take Myles Jury, and I think I'll take him by second round TKO, actually.
Yeah, he's also like Jury's chin has never failed him, even when he's gotten clipped in fights. He's never been an easy fighter to finish. So
De La Torre has been hurt in just about every UFC fight.
Yep. Let's see. De La Torre is coming in as the underdog, opening at plus 325. Lines bounced around a little, but he's basically still right there at plus 330. Jury opening at minus 475 and up around minus 430 right now, which I'm fine with that. Like, I have some questions about Jury's. My questions about Jury are all about Jury as an elite fighter. They're not about him as a fighter near the elite. Like, he's very obviously a solid UFC talent now. He's a great gatekeeper to the elite, and my only questions about him really are his ability to break through into the top 10. So he should be able to win this fight, and I think the odds are pretty fine in that regard. That brings us to Charles Oliveira versus Will Brooks, first fight on the pay-per-view. You're muted.
Sorry, I was just shouting the words Chucky Olives, which has become my obsession this week ever since I heard Pat Weidman say those words. It's the best nickname in MMA, and when Charles Oliveira embraces it, that'll be the day he becomes a contender at lightweight. I said this on the roundtable, but it has to be emphasized, right? Joe Silva's gone, but clearly his legacy and his love for inside jokes lives on, because we always talked about how when he made a classic that we all remember well, King Kevin Casey versus Elvis the King Mutapcic. He loved those kind of ridiculous nickname matchups that really were clearly only made because he thought it was funny. And here we have Will Brooks, who lost his last fight to a guy named Oliveira who couldn't make weight, is now making his comeback against a guy named Oliveira who can't make weight, who has now finally been forced back up to the lightweight division after missing weight for the fourth time in his featherweight career. And I think against Lamas, he missed weight by about 9 pounds.
Yeah.
Which again mirrors Cowboy Oliveira, who almost willfully missed weight by 10 pounds when he fought Will Brooks.
Yeah.
And that fight did highlight some of the problems that Brooks will have as a contender. We've talked about this before, and I talk about it every time I talk about him, but Will Brooks is a very precise, patient, calculated fighter. He's a slickster. He figures you out, he takes away your weapons, and then he pieces a game together as the fight goes on. He would be, with this mindset, a really, really good defensively minded boxer. But that worked really well in 5-round fights in Bellator. I mean, he was, after every single first round as a champion in Bellator, he was dominant. You know, he took the fight away from people, a little bit of difficulty at first, but figured them out and then completely nullified them. With only 15 minutes, that's harder, right? It's Will Brooks is a weird case of a guy who got to the championship level. He developed that champion mindset and strategy that we talk about all the time. You know, he figured out that difficult task of holding on to a belt after winning it. And now he's got to go back to the rank and file. Now he's got to go back to 15-minute fights and try to rearrange his style somehow to make it back to the point where he can be a champion style fighter again. So it's tough for him, right? He had trouble against Oliveira because he broke his rib, which sucks. And, you know, you can forgive him getting stopped because of that easily. But he had trouble taking over from Oliveira. Granted, Oliveira was much, much bigger than him, but it's not a good look for a guy who was brought into the UFC as a title contender, a guy who was expected to be fighting for the title very soon. I do think this is a lot more forgiving for him. I mean, on the one hand, Oliveira is about his size, a guy who was a featherweight, now back up at lightweight. So that's instantly more forgiving. Oliveira's a pretty good wrestler, but Will Brooks is a amazingly good wrestler, especially when his opponents are the same size as him. He is great with his submission defense. So Oliveira, who is pretty much all offense and can really be shaken up when his defense is tested, does not have an easy path against Will Brooks to really take the fight away from him at any point. You know, he's one of the most dangerous submission grapplers in the sport. But he is also a guy who gets submitted on the ground because he's so aggressive. And then when you take that to the feet, to that same mentality, he's just as aggressive, but much less capable of really holding on to and controlling the pace of the fight. And is well known at this point for kind of crumbling when his chin is tested, or when somebody is just picking him apart and controlling him, he falters badly. And I don't think that's going to be any better after 2 finished losses at featherweight. So I think Will Brooks has options here. He could probably do well if he just controls. I think, and Pat Wyman strongly believes he'll do this, I think he may be able to stand toe-to-toe a little bit and trade with Oliveira, get him into the clinch and control him there. Those are things that he can do. He's got a very well-rounded skill set. It's really just a matter of seeing how he will apply that skill set to get himself back to the main events and the title fights. So I still have faith in Will Brooks. I think this is a good comeback fight for him. Will probably be a chance for him to shine. And I did pick him in my Sherdog preview by decision, but I think that there's a really strong chance that he will finish Oliveira. Even though he's not an amazing finisher, I think he may try to make a statement here, and I think he probably can against a guy as shakeable as Chucky Alves.
Yeah, I will add one note I wanted to add to this too about Will Brooks' rise in Bellator and his style. It also should not be understated that a lot of what Will Brooks did and found success doing in Bellator was against undersized lightweights.
That's true.
And it means that he built a game too. That, this is also what we were talking about with Des Green, although Will Brooks is a better fighter than Des Green. He built a game predicated on his physical dominance, and then gets to the UFC, and I do worry significantly that he is going to have trouble being physically dominant over the lightweight division. Like, even his fight with Ross Pearson was not exactly a physically dominant performance. So,
yeah, it was really scrappy, actually.
Yeah. So and Ross Pearson's another dude who tried to cut down to featherweight. It was a terrible idea, but he's a small lightweight. So I worry in general about the overall ability for Will Brooks to be a championship level fighter in the UFC, because it's just his kind of game is not made necessarily for round winning if he's not physically dominant.
Yeah, I think that, again, you can override that with 5 rounds, right?
Yeah.
Because maintaining distance, Will Brooks is a really solid striker. Like, he's got an excellent jab. He is. I mean,
his boxing game exists, and he's got good parts to it, but it is not like,
he just has a style that it works best at. He's mixing it up in the pocket. He can do it pretty well, but it's not his strength. Ross Pearson was able to tag him a lot when he tried to do that. If he can maintain distance, if he has the luxury of being able to maintain distance, he can do it. He can prevent somebody from closing the gap. He's got excellent footwork, really nice little short side steps and pivots. He's got a clean jab, a really nice, quick, but powerful kicking game to kind of take away your legs as you try to pressure him. The problem is that he can't do that with these 15-round fights. And I'm actually interested to see if maybe Brooks will change his style for good and kind of try to make himself into a more aggressive fighter and really work on his defense and his combination punching in the pocket. This might be a good opportunity to try that out.
It might. Yeah, I mean, ATT would be able to help him do that more than many teams.
I mean, he trains with Dustin Poirier all the time. There's a good example right there of how to get inside and mix it up.
So the thing that really makes this Oliveira fight good for him is that Oliveira will give Will Brooks exactly the physical control that Will Brooks wants. Like, Oliveira will fight him for it and fight him hard for it, but he will continually rush into the pocket, look for collar tie, and let Will Brooks wrestle him. And then, Oliveira will try and out grapple him once those wrestling exchanges start. But I think that just is ceding too much ground to Brooks for me to trust Oliveira to catch a miracle sub, which he's been doing less of lately. I mean, that Myles jury choke or win in 2015, like he's caught, it's not like he's not catching guys, but Anthony Pettis and Ricardo Lamas were both able to work through Oliveira's grappling, and Brooks may not be quite on. Well, I mean, he might not be quite on Anthony Pettis' level as a grappler, but he's probably near Ricardo Lamas. Like,
he's probably a better wrestler than both of them, at least. And
he's at least a better wrestler than both of them. So,
and I think he's smart enough and calculated enough to do what both of those guys did, both Lamas and Pettis, which is use Oliveira's aggression against him.
Yep.
Let him walk himself into a bad spot.
Yep. They both did that. I mean, Pettis hit Oliveira with the same sweep like 5 times in that fight, just because Oliveira would just give it to him every time.
He grappled him like he was Myles jury.
Yeah. So I trust Brooks to do that, and I don't trust Oliveira's striking offense to take over, or physicality to take over against Brooks standing. So I think that Brooks will win this fight, but I do have questions about Brooks's ability to change or to implement a physical game in the UFC lightweight division.
Yeah.
Will Brooks is the favorite, opening at -350 and now falling to -250. Oliveira, the underdog, opening at +250, now down to +202. I'm glad those lines are closing a little. I don't think they should necessarily get too close, but Oliveira has a chance, and Will Brooks has a lot to prove in the UFC's lightweight division.
Yep.
That brings us to a welterweight bout: Thiago Alves, Patrick Cote. I think the principal thing here is that I trust Patrick Cote's chin more than I trust Thiago Alves's right now. Because Alves is still more dynamic than Cote and is still more technical than Cote.
Higher output too. But he can also... Well, I don't know. I feel like there are 2 versions of Thiago Alves right now as the old man fighter. Yeah.
And there's the crafty Thiago Alves that wants to sit outside and pot shot and is actually not that high output. And then there's the I got clipped Thiago Alves, I better throw down and make this a firefight, who gets a little wild and sloppy and can let himself be worked over a little. Who can also catch. He's also a more dangerous Thiago Alves. He can catch people with the kind of hard kill shots he used to land when he was younger.
Yeah.
But I think I trust Cote to be durable enough to survive that kind of fight, and dangerous enough to go pot shot for pot shot with Alves and do well. Just especially with his size and durability. Like, neither guy, if anybody's going to shoot for a takedown in this fight, it's going to be Patrick Cote. And otherwise, I don't know. It's a hard fight to pick because it's 2 dudes who are known for their power and
both of whom are old.
Both of whom are old. And both of whom have been pretty durable. Cote more so, but that's only because almost nobody else has been as durable as Patrick Cote in his career. So I'm trusting Cote's old man body more than I'm trusting Thiago Alves' old man body. But that's about it.
By the way, I know Thiago Alves is younger, but I just noticed this the other day. He debuted in 2001 against Gillespie and Tebow. He's been fighting for almost 16 years, which is insane. And has had like a bajillion surgeries and various injuries, which have even sort of accelerated now. Yeah, I totally get it. It's hard to trust Thiago Alves, but I kind of think his technical advantages here may actually shine. Alves, he's still been looking pretty good to me. You know, he hasn't looked like he's lost everything. He still looks like a smart fighter. I thought he was doing really well against Carlos Condit before getting caught by the elbow from hell. When he was not on the ground against Jim Miller, he was striking really competitively with him, and I think he was probably pretty badly diminished from the terribly ill-advised weight cut, which he only got down to 162 pounds and was still badly drained. And despite that, still looked like he could keep a pace fairly well. He just couldn't stop the takedowns. And that is something that's worrying because Patrick Cote is a big welterweight. He has been wrestling a lot more in the later stages of his career. And if it wasn't just the fact that he cut so much weight and was so diminished, if he's really the fact that his athleticism is fading is what prevents him from stopping takedowns the way he used to, then that could be a problem because Cote could even just nullify him and just suck up some of the time in each round by holding him against the fence and taking him down. But I also think that Cote has not been fighting the same level of competition necessarily. He got absolutely destroyed when he fought Donald Cerrone. I mean, he had really no moments of market success in that fight. Somebody who was capable of throwing sharp counters in the pocket just destroyed him. And Josh Berkman,
and who had a takedown game. I mean, Donald Cerrone's takedowns just absolutely wrecked Cote's world.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But also, you know, like Josh Berkman had a lot of success against Patrick Cote early with counterpunching, and then when he got away from his counterpunching, started to lose. I think Alves, who has fairly good defense, good timing, good triggers. I mean, when he was doing well against Carlos Condit, it was with counter punches. It was with the counter left hook, little short combinations, nice short steps. I think he can actually sting Cote with the counters, while Cote is really kind of a rudimentary striker still. You know, he's become rudimentary in a good way because he used to be insanely wild. He used to be a brawler, and now he's like relying on his 1-2s and his low kicks. But I think Alves will be able to figure that out. I don't think Cote has enough variety in his striking game to really catch Alves off guard just because of the fact that he's probably the harder hitter. So I think I will take Alves by a very close and very dicey decision. I think it'll be a fun fight.
Yeah.
Two old dudes, but I think it'll be very back and forth. So for me, it's really hard to know what to expect from either guy here.
Yeah, I think Alves' inactivity and just like getting outworked by Jim Miller just kind of has me feeling a little. It's just like, man, going back up against somebody who's a lot bigger and who's durable and who, you know, is not going to have the biggest problem he had with Cerrone, I think, which is just to being totally shocked that Cerrone had a wrestling game to offer him.
Yeah, I was thinking that too, but then I was also thinking like post Lyme disease, Jim Miller has looked really, really good.
Yeah, no, Jim Miller has looked really good. Thiago Alves didn't look awful in that fight. He didn't. But I don't know. I don't trust him.
It's because it was against a lightweight, and then you're fighting a guy who used to be a middleweight. Yeah, it's worrisome.
It's that, and it's how little Alves has fought, and you know. Even that Jordan Meehan fight was not like that was very close to being a loss as well.
Yeah, definitely.
You know? He hasn't looked as much as he's had flashes of looking like his old self. He has yet to have a fight since his loss to Martin Kampmann, really, where you're like, oh yeah, this is Thiago Alves, stone cold killer.
Yeah, where he dominated Kampmann and then got guillotined in the last seconds. Yeah.
That's like his last really great overall performance.
Yeah, it's true.
So that was a long time ago.
Patrick Cote has had more good-looking wins in the last like 2 years than Alves has had in a long time.
Cote is the slight favorite, opening at -230, falling to -158. Alves opening at plus 170, falling to plus 132. I think those lines do deserve to just fall towards even.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I don't mind Cote being the favorite either. I mean, you're looking at a guy who has had more recent success, who's bigger. There's a lot of reasons to like him here. I just like the style matchup for Alves.
Yeah, I understand that. That brings us to a women's strawweight bout: Cynthia Calvillo versus Pearl Gonzalez. Is this you or me? I've forgotten now.
I don't know. I can't remember. Let's see.
You. This is you.
Me. Okay. Both of us lost track. It makes me feel better about always doing it. Yeah, I like Cynthia Calvillo as a strawweight prospect. There's obviously a lot to like about her as a fighter. She's charismatic as well. Like, she definitely could be a bit of a star for this division. It seems a little weird that she's getting the main event slot here, although who am I to say, like, if she gets a break, then let her have a break. I can't like, say she doesn't deserve it or whatever. Like, she's getting a chance here to put on a show in front of a big crowd, so why not? And she looked really good in her UFC debut. So in a sense, she's earned it, and they're seeing her as someone who is marketable. We know what that typically means. Pearl Gonzalez, as you said earlier, may be the more marketable fighter in this matchup, being a smoke show, as you so aptly termed it earlier.
That's going to follow me forever now. I said one thing.
It's a great turn of phrase. I'm not even mocking you. I love it.
Yeah.
There's Pearl Gonzalez. She's a good matchup for Cynthia Calvillo, not in the sense that she's easy to beat. She should test Calvillo here. She's a little wonky, like a lot of, like regional fighters are, but she's dangerous. She's got a good selection of finishes, not against great competition, but then neither is Calvillo's record against great competition. The one thing she does have a real advantage in this fight is with striking. She's not as good defensively as Calvillo, which isn't saying a lot. Calvillo is not amazing defensively, but she does move her head. But Gonzalez has some real snap in her shots. Her straight punches really seem to have an impact when they land. She's got some good kicks as well. I would not be shocked if Calvillo, who relies a lot on that sort of awkward, hunched over, dipping jab, ends up ducking into a left high kick at some point in this fight, because Gonzalez is good timing and very quick with her strikes. So I can definitely see that happening. But Gonzalez is also not a great defensive wrestler, and Calvillo's got a really nice takedown game. And while she's a very sort of scrappy scrambler on the ground, she puts herself into bad positions all the time. We're talking about two women who both like to scramble, but Calvillo is always working towards a position of control. She's gonna excel in the scrambles to the point that she can get on your back or get into mount and keep you there. And Gonzalez will repeatedly have her opponents like on their backs in guard and just get put into a triangle. And then we'll use that as an opportunity to pass, which I like that scrappiness, but she's scrambling to defend herself, rather than scrambling towards a goal the way Calvillo does. So Gonzalez has a lot to offer here. It could be a very fun fight, especially if she gets to work her striking game on the feet for any extended period of time, which she may, because Calvillo has shown a fondness for trading strikes in a few of her recent fights. But when it goes to the ground, I like the sort of focused direction of Calvillo's game to beat out Gonzalez. I think Calvillo might get a second round submission.
Yeah, I have to take a small amount of issue with something you said in there.
Yeah.
Very small, which is Pearl Gonzalez having quickness in her strikes. And I think that's actually, that along with the grappling and wrestling problems, I think that's going to be a problem for Pearl Gonzalez in general at women's strawweight. She looks slow to me. She looks
with her strikes?
With everything, yeah. She looks really well tutored, but she looks slow.
I watched her and saw somebody who was slow on their feet but had good direct straight punching and things like that.
Yeah, like I think she's well practiced. I think she's spent a lot of time working on being a good practiced striker. But I think it's also to cover, like, it can't, at a certain level, it's not going to help the fact that she's just not fast.
Yeah, you may be right.
Like, especially seeing the way that she turns into her kicks and ends up kind of off balanced off of them. and things like that. It just speaks of somebody who has a lot of trouble getting their body to react as fast as they want it to. And Calvillo is not slow. Calvillo strikes me as somebody who has recently been getting a lot of good striking training, but has no striking base to work off of. So she's having to spend a lot, like she's getting a lot of the footwork down, she's getting the movement down, and she has yet to be able to learn to really commit to her punches.
Yeah.
That said, her fight against Bobby Cooper, she committed more than I've ever seen her do so before. She threw a lot better strikes and did better work than she had previously. And otherwise, she is a legitimately very good grappler. Like, her chain wrestling and the way she uses it to set up back takes, her back take game, are absolutely on point. And that's going to get her a long way in this division. So I think that Gonzalez, especially just her inability, I think, to move out of the way quickly enough for takedown, to defend takedowns, is going to be a huge problem. And I don't know that she's going to be fast enough standing to take advantage of Calvillo's own willingness to test out her kickboxing.
Yeah, certainly in the realm of movement, like getting out of the way or getting into position, Calvillo is much faster in that regard.
Yeah, so I think this is going to be a pretty easy fight for Calvillo, and it may just be the kind of thing that, like, it may be nice for the pay-per-view and that it'll move really quickly. But
yeah, which I guess was like the idea behind Calvillo's last fight too. It was like a nice little treat in the middle of the rest of the fights that were taking longer.
Yeah, but Bobby Cooper was, I think, a much tougher fight than Pearl Gonzalez.
Really?
Yeah, I think Bobby Cooper is a much more well put together, better more athletic fighter who fought better competition.
I think they're fairly similar matchups. Like, I think Amanda Cooper, Bobby Cooper, ABC has had difficulty really taking over fights against anyone.
Yeah.
And, but maybe it's the fact that Gonzalez has just been fighting, like, not cans, but fighters with no experience, like novices. So
I think it's that. Amanda Bobby Cooper is a decent athlete who does not have who's overly aggressive and not a great finisher anywhere. She's not a great grappler when it comes to finishing. She's not a power puncher in any way. And she lets her over aggression put herself into all sorts of bad spots. But she's at least a good athlete, and I'm not at all sure that Pearl Gonzalez is that. So that brings us the odds on that fight. Calvillo is a reasonable favorite, opening at -185, climbing out to -267. And Pearl Gonzalez opening at +145, climbing out to +216. I think those odds could continue to get wider. I don't see much in Gonzalez's game that would make me think that she's ready for a dedicated wrestler, basically.
Definitely not.
Let's see, is there Calvillo by submission is +305.
That might be a bet right there. I think that's very likely that she gets a submission win.
Yeah, her back take game is excellent. Even for women's strawweight as an entirety, her back take game is excellent.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a bet right there.
I think one of the great things she did in her fight that really had me impressed against Cooper was she had Cooper on her back.
She took the back from an anaconda.
Well, she let Cooper up and went and baited her into making a takedown. And when Cooper shot in, just took her back in a second.
Yeah.
It's just like, that's crafty. Like, you want to take this woman's back and you're like, okay, come take me down. Here, I'll give you my legs. And then just flash onto her back.
Yeah, she did similar things in that fight with, I think, Montana Stewart.
Mm-hmm.
The last fight before coming to the UFC, she had a lot of really, really nice scrambly back takes, like while her opponent was trying to wrestle her, and she would just kind of shut her down and then go behind and take the back.
Yeah. So
and stay there. She stays there when she gets it.
Yeah. She does, and she does a good job landing strikes to open up submissions and things like that. So I think that Calvillo by submission, especially at any kind of plus odds, that might be worth some kind of look. I don't know. Like I say, don't bet, but I was shocked to see it be that high. Let me put it that way. Whatever that means to you. Middleweight bout now, co-main event, Chris Weidman, Gegard Mousasi. This is tricky for me. Mousasi obviously has been on a tear lately, and Chris Weidman has not been on a tear lately. Chris Weidman has been on the opposite of a tear. But Mousasi has also not had to face anybody who could really wrestle lately at all. His best wrestler he faced was Talis Latis, who is a good wrestler in some ways, but also has his own problems. Is not the level of wrestler Chris Weidman is.
No, not even close.
Or even close. In fact, the last good wrestler, really good offensive wrestler that Gegard Mousasi faced was Jacare, who beat him. And Weidman, obviously that fight with Luke Rockhold was incredibly tough. And Rockhold showed himself to be an incredibly difficult challenge for Weidman to dissect, and one that I think really sapped Weidman. But Weidman looked pretty damn good in that fight against Yoel Romero early, before succumbing to Yoel Romero being Yoel Romero. And it makes this fight really hard for me to line up with Gegard Mousasi, because I think that Mousasi may very well give Weidman the pace that Weidman wants and the opportunities that Weidman wants. Like, Mousasi, he's been a more dedicated finisher when he gets somebody hurt lately. But until he gets somebody hurt, he is still very willing to just kind of lay back and pick his spots and try and, to threaten people with the fact that he's a better striker than them. And Chris Weidman doesn't get threatened by that. To a fault, you could say. But I'm not sure that Mousasi quite has what it takes to then really hurt Weidman. I don't know that Mousasi has the right style, I guess, to take Weidman out of that pressure. He doesn't have the same looping left hook of Luke Rockhold that's just so hard to figure out because it comes from such a weird distance and angles. He doesn't have this same sort of, insane grappling attack that Rockhold had either. And he isn't Yoel Romero. And Weidman did pretty well with Yoel Romero early. Just, figuring him out, getting his strikes in, staying aggressive and staying safe, and keeping on Romero.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of trust Weidman to be able to do that well enough to be able to get chances to out-wrestle Mousasi. So I'm picking him to win this fight. But, I think the biggest question for me is that how good is Chris Weidman's cardio really? Because even in his fight against Lyoto Machida, he faded in that fight.
Yeah, pretty badly. And Mousasi is very hard to hurt. But I also wonder, I wonder about Mousasi, especially too, as like a late finisher, somebody who is going to, once a fight, like if Mousasi just gets comfortable in a fight, or if a fight is not giving him everything he wants, Mousasi tends to either finish immediately, or he loses or goes all the way to the distance. Like, he's not a fighter who has been dangerous in the second and third rounds
like with the ability to just suddenly change a fight with a knockout or a submission.
Yeah, I don't know that he has any, even though he's had an insane number of fights, I don't know that he has any third round finishes.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know that Chris Weidman fading is going to necessarily put him in danger against Mousasi, other than it might like let Mousasi win a late round. But I feel like Weidman can take enough early in this fight for me to pick him to win it. That Mousasi's not going to hurt him, and that's going to let Weidman win rounds with his pressure style. So I'm picking Chris Weidman in this one.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of parallels here between this fight and Mousasi's fight with Jacare, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got a fighter who likes to pressure, who doesn't throw a lot of volume, but cuts off the cage well, stays in front of you, and wrestles very well. And is also, Weidman, maybe not on Jacare's level, but he's a pretty damn good submission grappler.
Yeah.
On the ground, it's pretty damn hard to beat him there. So if that happens to Mousasi, if he gets controlled, if he kind of goes back to classic Gegard, he might lose. Although there is the fact that Jacare, we've noted this several times before, he did fight Mousasi in the small cage. And the larger octagon will make it a little more difficult to shut Mousasi down because he does have good footwork and a good jab. A little more space to run around and might benefit him there, especially against Weidman, who's a little foot slow. Again, like Jacare, kind of a plotter. The thing is what I've seen from Gegard Mousasi lately has kind of given me hope for him as a contender in a way that I've never had it before, because I always expected Mousasi to lose this kind of matchup throughout his career. Like fighting an elite wrestler, that was always the guy who was going to beat him. And the thing I've seen from Mousasi lately is not just his usual tendency to finish early. He has been finishing early, but to be a lot more consistently aggressive. Like to stay in his opponent's face, to back them into the fence, and to use some things that have always been in his arsenal, or at least have been in his arsenal for a long time, the way they should be used. Mousasi has good defense. He's really hard to hurt. He's still incredibly durable. We were talking about this on the round table, but recall that it took one of the most violent finishing sequences in history to TKO Gegard Mousasi in his first fight with Uriah Hall, and he was still conscious. Like he was still there. He didn't even go out.
I mean, how do you crack a chin that doesn't exist?
He is insanely tough, though. He's like, I think he's even beyond the Carlos Condit level of taking punches. Yeah. He's crazy tough. So that, like if he can get in the pocket, he can take shots at least as well as Weidman if it's in an exchange, possibly better. Because I don't think Mousasi, even after the Hall thing, has any fear of being knocked out. Weidman may get a little jumpy now that he's been battered twice in his last two fights. And Mousasi also has very fast hands. That is a thing that I think hasn't really been celebrated enough for him, but the combinations he was throwing on Vitor Belfort were sickeningly fast. And even when he's throwing single shots, like going back to his fight with Ilir Latifi, you can't stop that jab if you're on the end of it. It's insanely difficult. It comes from weird angles, and his hands are lightning quick. And he's got a good amount of power in him, too. He's not like a crushing knockout puncher, but he has pop. He will hurt you if he hits you cleanly. And these days, when he hits you cleanly, that usually happens immediately before he hits you cleanly 5 more times. So what I am expecting from Mousasi in this fight is to pressure Weidman a bit. And I think if he can deny Weidman the chance to pressure, which is what Weidman does well, he can take over this fight. Because Weidman's, let's be honest, he's pretty bad off the back foot. Like, he doesn't really know how to fight moving backwards. He tends to retreat in straight lines. He covers up a lot. He gives opportunities to the kind of fighter who's willing to come after him. And Mousasi can replicate a bit of what Vitor Belfort did to Weidman, but do it for a lot longer and do it more consistently and not just mentally break the moment Weidman isn't knocked out by the first exchange. And so, yeah, Weidman will pressure at times in this fight. If he gets Mousasi down, I don't have hopes that Mousasi is going to do that well. Although Mousasi has been better at getting back up from takedowns, using the fence to his advantage. But what I would like to see from Mousasi in this fight, and what I hope to see, is that he will press the action and that he'll have an easier time stopping those takedowns. He'll have an easier time defending himself if he holds the initiative. And I think he can do it. So it's a pick'em fight to me because it really depends on which version of each guy shows up. But I just haven't seen the kind of improvements in striking ability from Chris Weidman that I hope to see, especially after he spent a year training with Mark Henry and then fought Yoel Romero and kind of just looked like Chris Weidman still. You know, he tried a couple neat little side steps and things like that, but it's even possible that maybe Mark Henry's not a great fit for him because Chris Weidman is not the kind of fighter that Mark Henry excels at turning out. He's not a Frankie Edgar. He's not an Edson Barboza. He's not a Marlon Moraes. He's a big, slow on his feet, powerful middleweight. So I'm not sure if he can improve under Henry or if he can really become a well-rounded striker at all. And without that, all he really has to threaten Mousasi is his wrestling. And if Mousasi approaches this fight the right way, I think he can nullify that enough to take rounds. So I'm taking Mousasi by decision.
Yeah. The only other thing I will say too, in favor of me, which obviously I'm always going to be in favor of me, is that the kind of guys that Mousasi has been beating lately are all people who absolutely crumble under pressure.
True.
You know,
that is true.
Hall, Vitor Belfort.
Yeah, we got 4 names basically, most of whom do not do that well in the
Thiago Santos, Talis Latus, even Costa Philippou. You know, like these are guys that when you take steps forward, don't just react poorly to fighting off the back foot, but actually just fall apart.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of my thought is like, if Mousasi's not just pressuring, but if he's not hurting and making Weidman want to go away so that he can follow up and really unload, will he be the new Mousasi?
Yeah, that's a good point. Weidman does not react well in the moment, but he certainly does not crumble.
Yeah. So I'm picking Weidman on that idea, but it's a tough one.
I can't fault anybody for taking Weidman in this fight. It's a really tough fight to call, and it should be. I mean, I'm really happy they made it. It should be really interesting.
Weidman opened at -125, is now at -107. Mousasi opened at -115, is now at -117. So it is a dead even fight that has stayed dead even. That's exactly where it should be. It's a great fight and should be fun.
Yeah.
And that brings us finally Daniel Cormier, Anthony Johnson, main event. What are you doing? What are you taking in this?
Oh, I like Daniel Cormier. You know, Daniel Cormier. A few words on the the place that Daniel Cormier holds in the collective hearts of MMA fandom. He doesn't get enough respect, man. I don't know how he's the underdog in this fight. We haven't read the odds yet, but I know he's a slight underdog. When he beat Anthony Johnson already, that's bizarre. I don't know how people cheered for John Jones over Daniel Cormier. Like, I can understand rooting for the guy who's going to win, but people liked John Jones more than Daniel Cormier. I don't know. People are going to applaud Anthony Johnson, who has a history with various forms of domestic violence and stalking, and who threw a yoga mat at a woman in a gym recently, over Daniel Cormier, who is like the light heavyweight division's nicest dad. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't get it. I really don't. And
I know you and Pat are both on this chain, but dadcore is not the world's most popular fad. I got to tell you.
Yeah, but how do people hate Daniel Cormier? Like, people don't hate dads. Nobody hates Dan Kelly. They just don't care. You know what I mean? But like, how do you like Anthony Johnson more than Daniel Cormier on a personal level? How's that possible?
I don't know. I think it's even more than Daniel Kelly. Like, Daniel Kelly looks dadcore, but Daniel Cormier is dadcore. Like,
I mean, all about that cake. He's like making goofy song parodies and shit. But I love him for that. He's such a sweet guy, you know?
He is.
I don't get it.
A
Anyway,
lot of unresolved fatherhood issues in the MMA fandom community.
yeah, I think that's probably part of it. But that aside, Daniel Cormier also does not get enough respect for his skill set. He's, other than John Jones, he's the best light heavyweight in the world. And he proved that the last time he fought Anthony Johnson. It would be a mistake to say that Anthony Johnson can't win this fight. In fact, it would be insane because he's Anthony Johnson. He is destructive in the extreme. He just takes people's heads off when he hits them. But Daniel Cormier knows he can take Anthony Johnson's power. He's done it once before. And he did it several times after that first shot. Took a head kick from Anthony Johnson. He took a bomb of a right hand. He took body shots from him, still controlled him. And that is something that I think that more than even the skill sets of these fighters is the defining characteristic of this fight. That Daniel Cormier has dedication and heart that Anthony Johnson lacks. So Anthony Johnson can definitely win in the moment. You know, he can find that big shot. But when it comes to tenacity and just doggedness, Anthony Johnson has now lost 4 fights in his career the exact same way. They're almost identical, down to the way that he was finished, where he has a big moment early, and then the other guy is too tough to put away or too smart to put away, and he just crumbles. You know, he actually, it's not a coincidence. He actually gives opponents the rear naked choke, because when they get him to the ground and he starts to lose heart, he just turns and puts both hands on the mat and exposes his neck. He's done it all the way back. His fight with Rich Clemente, his second fight in the UFC, and that was almost 10 years ago. And then against Josh Koscheck, and against Vitor Belfort, and finally against Daniel Cormier.
It does, bad stand-ups aside, it does say something that Anthony Johnson crumbled before Vitor Belfort did.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it absolutely does. It absolutely does. And yeah, Anthony Johnson, and I think too, I think Henry Hooft may in some weird way be bad for Anthony Johnson, because he's clearly made him a much better striker. His technique is, it will be, don't think of Anthony Johnson as just a slugger. He's a very sharp technical striker, defensively and offensively. He's got a jab out of both stances. He's got a variety of powerful kicks. He throws combinations. He measures distance and has nice triggers for his counters. He is a sharp striker. But Henry Hooft is also the don't quit, man up, that guy. And that's not a good thing to hear if you're Anthony Johnson, because if you have any hope of overcoming this tendency to quit, the last thing you want is for your coach to be constantly reminding you that quitting is something you could in fact do.
And
right?
that you are doing potentially and should stop doing.
Yeah, basically. He starts saying it when you are quitting. I remember, I've now said this 3 times this week, but when Johnson fought Cormier the first time, after the second round, he spent the whole round being stuck on bottom in half guard, being cut up with elbows, just being sort of ground to dust bit by bit. And he took 10 seconds to stand up. His eyes were full of blood from a cut over one of them. And he lumbered back to his corner. And what do you think the first thing Henry Hooft said to him was? It wasn't don't quit, but it was close, possibly worse. He said, "Hey, you've got 3 more rounds." I'm like, oh, he just reminds him of how much worse it's going to get. And I just don't get it. Henry Hooft is a brilliant trainer, not necessarily a great cornerman, and maybe particularly bad for Anthony Johnson, who has a problem with quitting, it's what he does. I mean, let's be honest. He tends to quit. He folds when the fight gets tough. And even sometimes in his mind, the fight gets tough translates to, I don't get the knockout right away. I mean, the problem with the fight with Daniel Cormier wasn't even immediately that Cormier was dominating him with wrestling. It was that Johnson got a big moment and then flung himself off balance because he was so desperate for the finish. And that's the thing that's going to be difficult to overcome for Cormier, who, yeah, he's getting older. He's been knocked down a few times. He was even hurt by Anderson Silva. He can be hurt. He can be caught out for a moment. But unless you put him away completely, it is very, very difficult to get Daniel Cormier out of the fight. And you combine that tenacity with immense physical strength. I mean, that can't be overstated, that people were posting, somebody posted to me on Twitter a GIF of Daniel Cormier after Luke Rockhold's win over Chris Weidman. And Luke Rockhold, who is bigger than a lot of heavyweights, is lying flat on his stomach, weeping with joy. And Daniel Cormier walks over and picks him up to his feet. Rockhold doesn't help. He's basically a little kid who weighs 200 pounds doing like the limp body thing. And Cormier just bends over and lifts him up to hug him. Daniel Cormier is insanely strong when he gets his hands on you. And he's also a phenomenally technical wrestler. All of the little adjustments he makes when he's got a grip, you know, he's got your leg, he'll pull it away from the fence, angle around to your side, step in, adjust, lift you for the takedown. All these brilliant little moves that he makes inside, complemented by his strength, complemented by his never quit mentality. I think that's a thing that Anthony Johnson can't overcome unless he gets lucky enough to land a shot so powerful that Cormier goes out cold, you know, or that he's so hurt that he can't actually defend himself. That's really Anthony Johnson's only hope in this fight, is that he hurts Cormier really, really badly. And while he's capable of doing it, the fact is that he needs to do that to win. And Daniel Cormier has options.
Yeah, I think that Cormier is definitely, he's the 9 times out of 10 smart pick. Although maybe 7 times out of 10.
It's Anthony Johnson. Like, let's not forget. It's a kind of power that no one in this division has.
I am picking Anthony Johnson. And I'm doing it.
You're a traitor, Zane. Okay, how would you betray the dad like that?
I don't want to do it. But I was watching that fight, their first fight again. And Cormier, this is one of those things. I remember when Cormier came out into MMA and people were like really surprised at how good and aggressive his striking was. You know, this is like around the, you know, obviously like right when he came into Strikeforce up through into fighting like Antonio Silva and Josh Barnett. And the thing is really that it's been that Cormier has been an absurdly elite athlete against a lot of heavyweights who are not elite athletes, like Antonio Silva and Josh Barnett. And his striking, his speed and power was just totally shocking.
Yeah.
As a light heavyweight against other elite athletes, he's not a good striker. He is a good pocket striker with uppercuts, a surprisingly decent one. But he is not, he can't depend on it. His range striking game, if anything, has gotten worse as he's tried to be a more patient range striker.
I think it's because at light heavyweight he has to pressure more, because at heavyweight he could dance around on the outside. He could be nimble and pick people apart because he was fast. And he's still fast. You know, he's still explosive and quick and really light in his feet for a guy with his build. But at light heavyweight, the guys are like basically the same size in terms of height and reach, but way faster and more athletic. So staying outside means getting picked apart. Yeah.
And it worries, like, I don't know how much work he can do to overcome the fact that he got hurt like 3 times in that Anthony Johnson fight inside a round and a half. You know? Like, hurt badly. And I know that Johnson is not like it, you know, that there's no reason that Johnson won't just sort of crumble and fall apart given enough time. But it is a question of given enough time. And I don't know that Cormier, the adjustments any adjustments he's going to have made are going to keep him from getting cracked again.
I mean, we both agree Johnson's going to nail Cormier in the first round of this fight. And he's going to hit him with at least one titanic shot.
Yeah. And I I think that if anything, even as much as Johnson will struggle, will always struggle with the same kinds of things, I think he is still improving the technical core of what he does well in ways that are subtle and hard and like mean something for him that can turn into better offense, a more dangerous version of the same offense. Like, I think the Anthony Johnson of the past three, the past couple fights since that Daniel Cormier fight, the past 3 fights, is a more dangerous, and even, I guess, the Anthony Johnson basically from the Phil Davis fight forward is a more dangerous fighter. It continues to be a more dangerous fighter. And he got a lot more opportunities than even, he got a lot of good opportunities against Cormier, and I think those opportunities are still going to be there. And so I got to pick him this time around.
What happens if those opportunities don't result in a knockout, though?
Oh, he loses, and that's so obvious.
Yeah. I mean, I can't. It's the thing. That's the best thing you can say about this card, right? We pretty much, on any of the fights where we've disagreed, we can totally see a case where the other person wins.
Yep.
And this fight is like, in a weird way, it's like a super old school matchup, where it would be really hard to see Rumble winning on the ground unless it's as an immediate follow-up to a knockout punch. And it would be really hard to see Cormier surviving for that long on the feet if he chooses to stay there. But they're like, the mentality of the two fighters comes into it. The durability comes into it. There are a lot of layers that make it more complicated than that.
Yeah. And Cormier didn't choose to keep it there in the first fight. He just got hurt a bunch. Like,
true.
He just ate a lot of shots on his way to finally being able to get it to the ground.
Very true.
And I don't know, like, this is why, when I said I started out with like 9 out of 10 when you're talking technically, but it's more like 6 or 7 out of 10 times Daniel Cormier wins, because he has he's got the toughness, he's got the more technical approach, he's got the right tools to beat Johnson, but he has to wade through fire to do it, and you just can't do that many times and win way more than half the time,
Yeah, especially if, as a 38-year-old fighter, you're becoming a little less durable.
Yeah,
which does seem to be happening. Although it may also be that Cormier is just fighting like the best athletes he's ever fought now. But still, this is like Rumble's prime. And Cormier has probably been out of his athletic prime for a little while. Even if he's still a great athlete, he's middle-aged. So
I'm picking Johnson, and I don't feel good about it, but I'm doing it.
You'll be happy if Cormier wins, though, right?
I will.
That's all I need from you, Zane.
Johnson opened at plus 110. He's now at minus 121. Cormier opened at minus 140. He's now to minus 102. So they are close to dead even, with Cormier the very slight underdog, despite him having won the fight before. And I wouldn't touch this fight for the world.
Mm-hmm.
You see it?
You could maybe, like, if you get Johnson in round 1 or under 1.5 rounds, like, what's Johnson by TKO? Because if he wins, he's going to win by TKO, right?
Yeah, Johnson wins by TKO is plus 121.
Not that sweet.
Not that sweet, but it's still plus odds. So
yeah, it's too hard to call. I would just stay away from it. Honestly, it's a very well matched card. It may not have like a ton of name value throughout, but all the fights are pretty well matched. There aren't many blowouts anywhere here, so it's kind of hard to bet.
Yeah, the Myles jury, Mike De La Torre, Magomed Babulatov, Jenel Lausa, those deserve to be the biggest favorites and are.
So you can't bet them. Everything else is like within, and even the ones that have 10.
Oh, I lost Connor. All right.
Hello, I'm back. Hey. Even the ones that have workable odds are really hard to call.
They are. On that note, then, we're going to need to close this up because we've gone way too long, but it's a good card. Deserved it.
It is.
You can find me on Twitter at TheZaneSimon. You can find Connor on Twitter at BoxingBush. It's BUSCH. You can find both of us over at BloodyElbow.com. If you're watching this video on YouTube, give it a like. That's a thumbs up down there. That helps us a ton. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, MMANation.com.
Click the bell. Subscribe for notifications.
Okay, yeah, click the bell when you subscribe. That means you'll get the notifications so that you actually get the shows when they go live. And then we'll be back. I won't be here for the 6th round this week. I got other stuff I got to do, unfortunately. But we will be back next week for, oh God, what's the follow-up event? It's UFC.
Demetrius Johnson versus Wilson Hayes.
Okay.
UFC on Fox.
UFC on Fox 24. We'll be back for that next week. So we'll have the Vivisection and Care Don't Care If I Did It, all that good stuff. And we will see you all then.